That is the absolute truth here. Yes, he's Marky Billson, Tri-City Sports Now. We're trying to remember football players who became TV stars. I can remember Fran Tarkenton was a guest host on, and I'll give you another football player now that you mention it that was very prominent. Fran Tarkenton was on That's Incredible. He was a guest host there. He also was a commentator on Monday Night Football when Don Meredith couldn't make it. Meredith had a TV show on NBC in the 70s. It's just before my time. I don't remember it. And Alex Karras, who was the star of Webster with Emmanuel Lewis back in the 80s with his own wife and all that. So those are some other, big-time football players. Karras is yet to make the Hall of Fame. He made this upcoming class, but he was obviously a premier defensive player in the 60s and such. So those are some other guys that I can recall that tried, to make it in showbiz and to whatever extent may have, and to a certain extent and all this. Anyway, I did want to ask you this, and this was the one story that you had. You had the best teams that never made a bowl game for Tennessee, or the most talented teams. And 4 of them had losing records, Caleb Calhoun of allfortennessee.com. I was surprised at that. Why didn't you dip into, let's say, one of those non-bowl teams from, say, when Bob Nealon was starting out? I mean, from 26 to 32, with Bobby Dodd, a pretty good quarterback of the day, the Vols only lost 2 games from 26 to 32. How come those teams weren't included on your list of most talented Tennessee teams never to make a bowl game, but more recent teams with losing records did?
Well, I actually said in the story that I was going to have to limit this to the modern era.
Okay.
Because of the fact that, you didn't have bowl games outside of the Rose Bowl until the mid 1930s, and then even at that point, you only had 4, and so you had to win the SEC to go to a bowl game at that point. And so it was kind of, I think the real expansion of bowl games, I think, was 65, roughly 1965, and so I said at that point that I was really just going to count from Doug Beakey onward, looking at these, because there were up until that point, there were plenty of Tennessee teams that didn't make bowl games that could have made my list. I mean, heck, 1914 went undefeated, 9-0, and they could actually lay claim to the first great championship Tennessee team, and there weren't bowl games at that point. So
no, there's the Rose Bowl. I mean, you had the Rose Bowl in that era, but yeah, and that was. I mean, I know that in the old days, let's say the '39 team that was unscored upon in the regular season, it was such a big deal because the Rose Bowl prior to World War II was really best team in the West versus best team in the East. That was what it was considered to be at that time, and something of a de facto national championship game, although, the AP poll would certainly disagree with that when it came out in 36 and such. But yeah, I mean, that was, I understand where you're going with now. I still, though, like I said, it seems as if, and I guess this is one of the things that comes with SEC membership, you go 6-6 in the SEC, you're going to a bowl game. I mean, which might show you what a bowl game is worth these days, but nevertheless, that I was kind of curious about that. Why did you take the 76 team over the 75? The 75 team, if memory serves, was nationally ranked and didn't get Bill Battle fired.
Yeah, the 76 team, I based it off NFL talent, and the 76 team actually had Stanley Morgan as a senior, and I think Larry Severs was on that team too. And so you had 2 elite receivers. There was a good bit of talent on that team. Again, I kind of did it on a mathematical basis based on who on the NFL talent that turned out and the experience of that NFL talent. Because it was about the most talented team to not make a bowl game. And that team, looking back, was actually pretty loaded with talent. If you go back and look at what they placed in the NFL. And so that's why I ended up putting the 76 team on there. The 75 team still had a lot of those players, but they were a little less experienced, so that's why I put 76.
It's Stanley Morgan, really, I can recall the New England Patriots were summoned to play the Pittsburgh Steelers at Neyland Stadium the year of the World's Fair in Knoxville, as well as the year after, because the game was so successful. And I was at the second one, and I couldn't understand why people were cheering for the Patriots over the Steelers, because, the Steelers were the Steelers. It was the Patriots at the time. They weren't anything. But it was all about Stanley Morgan. And to a Knoxville crowd. I mean, it was, and whenever he would do anything, it would just go crazy and all this. Anyhow, that's one of the things going on. You've been writing a little bit about the Summer League, but before we get to that, I want one more football note before we switch over to Tennessee's basketball exploits and news. Some now feel the Volunteers are a basketball school, but I went through my Lindy's. That's out now on the newsstand. And here's one of the things I've noticed about the Vols the last few years. They have not been ranking high in terms of positional units. Things like, running back units, defensive lines, special teams, that sort of thing. In fact, I remember in 2017 when the Vols were preseason nationally ranked, but I believe it was Phil Steele who said, you know what, I don't give any of the units at Tennessee the upper half of the SEC. You saw that a preseason ranking was based on reputation then. And, of course, the Vols went 4-8. But one positive that I see now the units nationally, not necessarily there, but Lindy's did rank the Tennessee secondary as the 21st best in the country. That was the one that ranked in the top 25. I can kind of see that, but I want to ask you, Caleb Calhoun, how far can a secondary with even with Bryce Thompson and Nigel Warrior coming stars take a team, in your opinion?
I think a great secondary can take a team pretty far if you're loaded everywhere. Now the thing is, a great secondary can only take a team pretty far if there are no weaknesses, and there is still one lingering question about free safety. But everywhere else, provided there's no injuries, is locked up. I mean, Balin Buchanan is very reliable to play nickel, and the other quarterback, Alontae Taylor, Bryce Thompson did rack up stats last year, which is why he earned freshman All-American honors, but Alontae Taylor showed just as much promise as a freshman quarterback on the other side. But yeah, for secondary to be elite, I've said that the entire unit has to be great. I mean, I go back to, I know this is more NFL, but, the Patriots were at their best defensively when they had a dominant secondary, and the Seahawks let's call it what it is. They shut Peyton Manning down in that Super Bowl solely because of how elite that secondary was.
That's a good point. Yeah, 8 points. There you go in the Super Bowl. I can recall that and being very stunned. I was like, how can Peyton Manning only put up 8 points? This. All right, that sort of thing. I'm not sure I'm willing to give Taylor equal billing with Thompson just yet, though. I like your comment there. I'm not sure I'm 100% down with it, but there you go. All right. So I'm big on Thompson. You're big on Taylor. There you go. Good corners for the Vols this year, I guess. Let's switch over to hoops. Summer League. I got to tell you, I'm not huge on the Summer League, but I am reading, hey, Grant Williams is doing big things off the bench and all this. First question I got to ask, though, is why is Grant Williams on the bench in the Summer League? Tell us a little bit about what these Vols, and I know that Schofield is doing well. In addition, tell us about the Summer League and the contributions of Grant Williams and Admiral Schofield.
Yeah, they've both done actually very well, and not only that, we come out retroactively and find out that Detroit had Jordan Bone graded as a first-round draft pick and was shocked that he was still on the board when they had a chance to make a move for him late in the second round. I think that Summer League is one of those where, you kind of sit, if a player shows any signs of being a little dinged up, you sit him down. I'm a big Grizzlies fan. Grizzlies drafted John Morant. They're not even letting him play the Summer League because he had issues with his knee. And obviously Zion hurt himself in the first game of Summer League, which, by the way, hear me now, quote me later. You're going to hear a lot of that about Zion Williamson in the NBA. I just don't think he's going to be able to stay healthy throughout his career. But
it's not all about the shoes. Mars Blackman was wrong. Go ahead, Caleb Calhoun.
Right, exactly. But yeah, Grant Williams and Admiral have shown a lot of promise. I think Admiral has shown, again, exactly what we expected, that he can be a very, very, very good all-around role player for people who was drafted, he's shown a lot in college, but he still was drafted on potential. Because the fact is, he's not a big enough power forward to play the way he played in college. So I think Boston drafted him with plans to really work on his outside shot. And if they can really develop that over the next couple of years, he could be a very good NBA player. But you can't – that's probably why he's coming off the bench right now. You can't really – Grant Williams, as his game is right now, can't be a starter in the NBA. He's going to have to become a much more consistent outside shooter for that to happen.
Interesting. You think
the
it?
NBA now is going to stretch floor out. They love those power forwards that can play out on the perimeter, and that's what Grant Williams is going to have to be.
It's interesting. I'll tell you what I was surprised with the Summer League. The first game for the Bucks Summer League team, Fletcher McGee, who is the all-time leading three-point shooter and, of course, led Wofford almost. I mean, if he had been able to hit a single bucket, if he hadn't gone ice cold and choked, Wofford would have been in the Sweet 16 out of the Southern Conference. And instead, they lost to Kentucky. But I'll tell you this about the Terriers and all this, or McGee, he only got 7 minutes in the Bucks' first Summer League game. And I was like, really? What is this about if Fletcher McGee can only get 7 minutes in such a game and all that? I was surprised to see that, the all-time three-point shooter in college basketball. Speaking of college basketball, one opponent late November has been selected. The Vols will play in the Emerald Coast Classic. And we know that they're going to play Florida State. And this will be in Destin, Florida in November. And then we know that the winner of that game, it's a tournament, they'll play the winner of Purdue, so there could be a rematch of the NCAA tournament, or Virginia Commonwealth, which is where Dr. Richard Sander came from. He later became the AD at ETSU and helped revive football there. So I just want to ask him, in that game against Florida State, okay, the schedule comes together, but are you looking forward to this Emerald Coast tournament in Destin, Florida? I mean, does this excite you at all? Tell us what your opinion is of Tennessee playing Florida State and possibly Virginia Commonwealth or Purdue next season.
Oh yeah, those are always exciting. I mean, I've always said my favorite time of the year in sports is kind of that Thanksgiving week where you're in the heart of football season for both sports, and then you have college basketball has all of those exciting tournaments going on where you get to see early showdowns between top-notch teams. I think that, and what you see is, and here's the big thing, no one talks about this, but one thing I've always liked about college basketball, particularly the selection committee, they don't place emphasis on when you beat a team. They just place emphasis on who you beat them and maybe where you beat them. And I think a lot of people get shocked by certain things that happen in March because the selection committee does what they should do, and they go back and look at what teams did in November. And I think that playing Florida State, VCU, and Purdue, Florida State for sure, and VCU or Purdue, gives Tennessee a great chance to really spike their schedule strength early on in the year. And it's one of those where you gotta love it if you're a fan of college basketball, because then it's actually sometimes it's more fun than even watching conference regular season basketball, given the fact that all the emphasis is on the conference tournament.
I can see that. I would point out Florida State last year, if you're curious, 29-8. Sporting News back in April ranked them for this season way too early rankings, number 16. Of course, they also had Tennessee as number 8, which I think is also, now that there's no Williams, no Schofield, no Bone, that's a little bit high right there for Tennessee. But we shall see what is going on. They do return 2 guards, so it's a challenge. Real quick in our last minute, though, I got to tell you, as the Tri-Citian, I'm disappointed that Rick Barnes, he'll go to play Florida State in Florida, but in ETSU, in a year where they may be nationally ranked in Johnson City, he's already said, I'm not coming back to Johnson City. Is that any way to treat Johnson City, Tennessee, when you are the state's team?
Yeah, I mean, what's he worried about? That it's going to be a road game? I'm sure it would be a home game in Johnson City for him.
You might be surprised, but yes, I think the last time they did it 3 years ago, there were a lot of Vols fans there, but I think it was like 4,000, 2,000 with ETSU. ETSU does generally draw halfway decent, about 4,000 a game and such. So.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, you know how I feel about that. I feel that Tennessee basketball should be playing all the schools across the state. I've been very...
There you go. I got to take a break and go. He's Caleb Calhoun, all for Tennessee. I'm sorry.